Hi everyone. How are you all doing today?
Good, very good.
How are you?
Very good, very good. Welcome to the last session of our L&D Summit. It's been an excellent journey so far. We've spoken about a lot of different facets. We've spoken about education technology. We've spoken about the new age education tech in L&D projects. We've spoken about the importance of L&D in strategic business decisions. And how the training arm plays a crucial role in heavily service-oriented industries. And today, in our closing session, we will be talking about a problem that continues to torment more than 80% of organizations, which is measuring the ROI and value of training programs. Every function that has successfully applied ROI, right, it has gone through the same process. It has gone through this phase of being burdened with tons of data, of focusing on intermediate metrics instead of actually being able to identify end goals, right? And today we'll be touching upon these aspects. But hey, why so serious? While we're at it, let's have some fun too.
Sure, absolutely.
We have a rapid fire round organized for you all, both of you today, both our guests today. So to our viewers, kahin jayega mat, dekhte rahiye, stay tuned. I'm Sakshi Soul, founder of Provis Learning and Consulting, your host for today. And on the panel, we have two incredible women, Tanya and Lakshmi. Hi Tanya, hi Lakshmi, hi again.
Hi.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to have both of you here, and thank you so much for making time for the session.
Pleasure is all ours.
This is going to be a fun session. Okay, so Tanya is a regional training manager marketplace at Swiggy, and Lakshmi is an L&D consultant. And both of you come with extensive experience. We're talking about more than a decade of experience in the training space back in Europe. And honestly, with my love to collect and use data for decision making, I am fired up about the discussion today. And I hope you are too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Nice. So we have a few questions to ask you about ROI and value and so on. But like I said, we also have a rapid fire, which we will weave in between. So we're going to have a bit of industry insights, expertise being discussed with you. And then we'll jump to rapid fire and repeat.
All right, I'm pumped.
Perfect. To start off, we'll start with the first aspect that I would like to start with is the importance of including business goals into training program design and the ambiguity around it. Mm-hmm. So the challenge that happens is that any training program is supposed to be, aimed towards achieving a business goal, whether it's tangible like customer satisfaction scores or it's intangible like employee engagement. Start with end in mind. It's a great mantra, but it's not very easy to achieve. It's easier said than done. And the ambiguity definitely makes it even tougher. So if I were to ask you, Lakshmi, let's start with you. Why is it important to include or integrate business goals into our L&D projects or programs?
Right, I'm glad for that question because that is one of the major issues or gaps that we often see. One part of the problem could be that when we get requests, when we are asked for training help, it in itself comes without the business outcome in mind. So people would approach L&D saying, hey, my team has a comprehension issue. Could you help me with that? Instead of actually saying why they want help with the comprehension. It could be related to an increase in quality or an increase in customer satisfaction rate, as you mentioned. But they never come to L&D with the end program goal in mind, right? They do the TNI by themselves, come to us with the issue, and then L&D gets really busy trying to solve for the single issue that's been identified. On the other hand, even L&D or training teams are also a little guilty of like focusing on the issues rather than focusing on the end goal. So in my opinion, I think the more we focus single-handedly on what the end goal is, so if you can see your goal post, which is related to stakeholder expectations or business outcomes, like in the example that we mentioned, it could be the customer satisfaction rate at the end. That's the goal. Then everything that you do has to, in a way, impact that rather than you find out a reason saying, it could be comprehension issue, and I'll increase the comprehension issue, and that's the training goal, right? So it's important not to get sidelined and focus on the main objective of why you're doing anything at all.
I think that's a very good point that you bring out, Lakshmi. The fact, like just the example that we highlighted was customer satisfaction scores, right? We tend to start off with that, both sides. Let's call it co-ownership between L&D arm and the business unit, and say we are both focusing on customer satisfaction scores initially. But as we progress in the training needs analysis phase of L&D, we tend to get sidetracked to just one or two aspects of it instead of focusing on, hey, eventually what I wanted was customer satisfaction scores should improve, right? Very interesting point that you bring out. Tanya, anything else that you would want to add to it?
Just one point, that sometimes it also is the reverse. So I remember an example where I was asked for management training. Okay. But when the deep dive was done and we figured out what was happening, people were just struggling to manage their emails, and they were spending 2 hours, 2.5 hours every day skimming through what is important, what's not important, because all organizations, almost all organizations, and I can say that confidently, in our induction programs, we never teach people to manage email.
Yeah.
Do we? We don't teach we teach them meeting etiquette. We'll teach them, okay, this is your chat interface. But do we teach them on how to, create templates, or just very simple things like how to create folders and rules so that all your important emails can go there and you don't have to read 1,000 emails. You just read your priority. So it works in reverse. It works this way also, where you will get the minuscule problem, but the problem is much bigger. But it will also happen that you will get such a big problem, but actually this is what you're trying to solve.
Yes.
And it will ultimately solve your problem of time management.
Right. Very interesting. So I would look at it as you have an end goal still, right? But let's take a step back and see what's the cause of it, the root cause analysis, and figure out why is it happening and how can you solve it. So a bit of problem solving and figuring out what is the area that you need to continue training on. But uska bhi eventually the impact is on your overall thing. Let's say the turnaround time for responding to an email or a client requirement is X number of hours. But because you put a better process in place, that's what you focused on. It started reflecting on your turnaround time.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Right? Okay, so here I'm going to come up with I'm going to speak about a problem which is missing information. So at the first phase itself, where we are doing training needs analysis, right? We're trying to get details from business users, or we're trying to gather data that has been captured at any backend for that matter, right? Customer satisfaction scores, maybe, for example. So, but the data is not always clean, or it's not complete, or it's not something that can be easily read or understood. So there are two aspects that I would want to ask over here, Tanya. This question is to you. One is, how do you kind of deal with, can we do any tips to improve maybe the data collection process, or to still continue working towards an efficient L&D program or a training program, even with those missing data points?
The advantage of being in L&D is the fact that we realize the importance of planning. Okay, we get all of these bits and pieces of information in our training classroom or in our meetings, and L&D professionals with these anecdotes, and if that can apply to data, can really do wonders. So I'll tell you, the biggest problem that happens with this missing information is when you're trying to do something new. When it's a new process that you're trying to do. Or like a very recent example, this whole work from home situation that we had, all right? And we never hired people on the basis of the competency that you will be able to manage remote teams.
Yeah.
Is your ability to manage remote teams. We didn't hire based on that competency, but now it's the need of the hour. Do I have any data to prove that if I do this, it'll work?
Yeah.
Nothing available. This situation has never occurred before.
Exactly. But you can work with anecdotes. That anecdotes can be converted into data. You can work with a predictive analysis. Maybe do like a focus and a control group. try a training program on 5 or 6 people, see how effective it is, and if it is moving any numbers, it is moving in a certain direction, and then you say that if with 5 people we were able to do this, then with 1,000 people, this is what we will be able to achieve. When there is information, there has to be a control and test.
Will it be correct for me to say that it's kind of like a pilot project? Like, let's try it out with a smaller group and then push it to a larger group. Nice.
That is, if your organization wants to see how will it change things for me, and if they are looking at proof, right? Everyone knows it's a need of Java. So then this kind of a process, it helps.
So it makes me a little curious. Now, when you do a pilot project, right, you're testing every aspect of it. And there will be times when something has not worked. But it's not necessary that the idea is bad. It just needs a little improvisation, right? How do we kind of move forward, or what would you elaborate on that?
See, with any pilot process and whatever data that you share or whatever you share, I'll take an example here. So organizations that use G Suite, all right. Now, when you're training on a Hangouts platform, and of course, for some organizations, it might be a limitation as well because of data security, etc. You really find it difficult to measure the effectiveness of that training because learner engagement is limited.
Right.
Correct. But let's say, for example, you're proposing that these are the results we were able to see, but if we are able to add this XYZ element into it, either in whatever terms, in terms of an external tool or in terms of a webinar platform or whatever, there has to be some predictive analysis that we can do. In that case, we will be able to move the numbers to Y or Z or X plus 1. So that called out right in the beginning itself. What went wrong? What am I willing to change? How will that increase or decrease my cost? And then based on the results that we have seen, much.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you conducted a pilot project, right? And then you maybe did not fly the way that we expected it to fly, or the results were not aligned to what we wanted it to achieve. But the idea is not bad. You made a few tweaks based on the research, you studied the data, you understood what went wrong, what could be done better. And uske basis pe, there's a hypothesis you're creating that this is what will happen if we make these changes now going forward while we are implementing it to a larger group. Is that right?
Correct. Absolutely. It will be a hypothesis. If it has happened in the past, it will be a hypothesis.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to pick one point that you spoke about, which is not being able to understand the engagement when in these virtual trainings that you're doing, right? And I'm going to shift my focus to Lakshmi now. So this is the evaluation segment of it, right? Understanding the engagement of your audience is a very important aspect of the entire overall evaluation principle if you talk about. So my question to you is what are the kind of tricks, or what could organizations do to make sure there's a 360-degree effective eval process? Because it can't be only about your assessment scores. It can't be only about the engagement during the session. So how do we make a 360-degree eval process?
Right. So training in effect primarily differs from how you process information in an adult versus a child, right? So that's the difference between pedagogy and andragogy. And with the recent times or changes, we've realized that there is a difference in andragogy in terms of how they learn in front of you, which is instructor-led training, or when they are in person, versus how remote learning sort of completely changes the ball game, right? Engagement, for anybody who's even done a single webinar or training session, knows that is completely different when you get to see them in person, because there's a lot of paralanguage at work. You can see their body language, you can see whether they're liking it or not through eye contact. None of that happens virtually, right? So there are a lot of plugins and tools that help you. Technology has grown a lot. So you have poll system, you have survey inbuilt, you have a lot of tools apart from Google Suite that you can just add on and plug and play during your session. But the engagement during the session is sort of 30% of the overall engagement that you get from participants, right? What's more important and what's mostly important in training is what you do after the training, which is the follow-up. So follow-up, I think the traditional methods holds water as much as any other method, because after the classroom training, the follow-up is the most important process. The same applies for virtual so far is the trend that I have seen. So you can engage with them by creating remote breakouts or groups and giving them activities or projects. Anything that they can do together where there is a segment of peer learning involved as well adds in a lot of value, because as much as they would learn from you, they'd learn tenfolds from each other. So, in terms of effectiveness, evaluation, engagement, all of this becomes a lot easier and more efficient if you have a follow up process in place. So, what happens after the training should be the primary focus of a program design.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I would want to, let's say, dig a little deeper on the second or the last phase of evaluation. So we start off with, understanding your participant engagement, and then we move to the assessment scores, which are the second level or the second phase, and then we keep moving further into understanding. Yes, so here is where I'm stuck. Your phase 3 and phase 4.
Right. So evaluation is the closing the loop, if you will, right? There's one more step after evaluation, which is updates or changes that you constantly do, optimization, and then it goes back to needs analysis again. But at the evaluation phase, it will fail completely if we don't know what the need was to begin with. So going back to how we started the conversation, it's important to know the goal. So I'll take the example that Tanya mentioned about, we have never hired people for work from home capabilities or work from home people management, right? Remote people management. Most companies are built with in-person capabilities in mind. Yeah. Now, when you're designing a solution to address that particular gap, you need to really know what your goal is. Do you want to increase the engagement of your team members or your reportees? Do you want to increase the productivity rates rather, right? Like, depending on what your goal is, how you go ahead and design the entire process versus what you're evaluating will also change.
Interesting. All right. So here I'm going to break the monotony with a quick rapid fire round with both of you. Okay, so I have this bowl with me, which I'm going to pick a chit from. Let's start with Lakshmi. The first question for you. All right. If you had one wish or a superpower, what would it be?
Oh boy, it keeps changing every season.
What's your current wish?
Currently, I just wish that I'd wake up and food would be prepared and appear magically in front of me, so that I don't have to do the cooking on a daily basis.
Oh my god, this is such a big thing right now. All of us wish for the same, don't we?
Absolutely.
I can't complain.
No. Okay, I'm picking up the second chit for Tanya. An emoji that describes you as a facilitator.
As a facilitator, the one with the sunglasses. So I always oh my god.
Oh, yeah. So cool. Nice. How about you, Lakshmi? If I were to ask you the same
I think I'm on the other end of the spectrum, right? I think mine would be like, thank you for giving me your time.
We should also ask this question to the participants you guys have taught. Yeah. Okay, we're going to do one more out of this. Tanya, a song that fires you up to work.
Oh, there is this song from Highlight Tribe, Tibet, Free Tibet. So on my way to work, when I used to go to work, on my way to work, I used to hear these two songs, Free Tibet and Shankara from Highlight Tribe, and it's just like the energy in that song is
all fired up. Like bring on Monday.
I can work with my sunglasses on.
Awesome. All right, Lakshmi, one more for you.
All right.
Okay. If you were not a trainer, what would you be?
Oh gosh. This is my life story. I did try to find that answer in the 1 year sabbatical that I took. Turns out I have no other skills apart from training. This is the only skill I have. So yeah, I don't know what I would be if I were not a trainer. I don't know. Probably at the mercy of the elements.
So you found your calling, no? मतलब trainer ही होना था and trainer ही बन गए. Oh my God. Nice. All right. So moving back to the discussion now, and we'll break again in a few minutes.
Sure.
I'm going to talk about data over here. Two key issues that we face usually is one is information overload, and again, like we spoke about, this is an issue that every organization or every function rather has faced at one point of time. Some of them have streamlined today, but it continues to haunt every function. Information overload, there's so much data available and you can't focus on the right variables. And the second aspect is the journey of weaving an actionable story for decision making. So you might have data, you might have some insights, but they're all spread across and they're not connected together, right? Here I would invite both of you to elaborate your experience or a few tips that you could share with our viewers today on the challenges with respect to capturing relevant data, making decision making easier as a process. I'd start with Tanya over here.
Sure. This point is actually very close to my heart because there is so much data that we are working with, and even as L&D functions, now we have moved towards working with a lot of data, and L&D professionals are not typically data oriented. Typically, right? It's a skill that professionals need to build in themselves, and the lens that a training person will be able to see data from will be very different from what an ops person will be able to see, right? So, in my experience, I really like convert anecdotes into data.
Okay.
So instead of just creating pivots and graphs on the entire thing, on the entire set of information that you have, if I have heard like certain things, certain nuances from some people that this is the problem I'm facing, that is the problem I'm facing, I'll double click on those elements only.
Okay.
Right. So that has helped me really pinpoint, okay, so this is my problem area. If I were to give you an example, we were working on average handling time for a bunch of newbies, okay? And we are looking at the data every single day, and we are mind boggled as to what is really happening. As in, we are looking at, okay, so this problem, so much AHT, that so much AHT, this is the highest number. So you have your entire data and you're just pivoting it and you're just making graphs out of it. So that you can see, okay, what is your 80-20 spread or whatever you're trying to do, right? What helped is having an open conversation with my reportees and having an open conversation with the supervisor. Saying that when you are helping these folks, what are they struggling with? And then we took instances and then searched for them in the data. We got our answer.
Nice. So now again, like you said, we're not always data oriented, right? We don't maybe look at data the way an ops person would look at data, or second would be just generally the kind of skill sets that we hire in the L&D arm, right? We focus a lot on, let's say, someone who does training analysis, or someone who knows how to facilitate, someone who knows how to create content, is aware of SCOM, and so on and so forth. But very rarely would we focus on somebody who understands, who's a data scientist, let's say, right? But there is a requirement for it, because every day we are talking about, hey, how do we measure value out of the training programs that are happening? So when you get data from so many different sources, like you spoke about a meeting with a particular team to figure out, hey, what's not working right for you in terms of getting guidance and so on. Or even otherwise, there are a lot of informal conversations that happen. Over chai, coffee, you'll get to know a lot of things, like, you did this training session, this is what was a requirement that was not met. And people will often tell you कि hey, अच्छा था सेशन बट ये इसमें और ऐड कर सकते थे, या ये इसको ऐसे इम्प्रूव कर सकते थे, वो सारा डिस्कशन दे ऑलवेज कम टू यू, राइट? And this is all unstructured information. This is all unstructured data. Now, how do you start improving it in the data? Because you spoke about we plug that into analyzing what did not work for a training program and start continuously evolve from there. So how do you do that? How do you plug it in? Do you have like a data scientist at work?
You don't plug it in. Search for it.
Search for it.
Search for it. So if someone is telling, so like for example, if I have a customer service team who is working on 20 different type of requests. Okay. And out of those 20 different type of requests, you can analyze a month data, a week's data, or a single day's data. But let's say you get this information, this anecdote from someone that on so and so date, on a Sunday, because of an outage, this particular issue was taking a lot of time. So you search for that issue on that date, and then try to figure out because of this date, this issue, what has been the impact on my overall data. Please search for that anecdote in the data.
That what somebody else might have picked on and figure out if it actually exists on the data that you captured already. Interesting, very interesting. Lakshmi, I'll come to you now on elaborating on, let's say, the challenges relating to this particular aspect.
Right. In my opinion, I think having more data than what you know what to do with is a good problem to have in comparison to not having enough data, right? It's easier to work with in the long run because you don't end up spending a lot of time in data gathering, right? The challenges, however, is to really know which bits to focus on, which would give you the maximum output or impact for your buck, right? So 80-20 is one of the things that Tanya has mentioned. There are other techniques. Like one of the things that I find really useful is doing a little bit of qualitative analysis. So if you have so many pieces of information and you know what your end goal is, where you want to make an impact, you basically compare each piece of information with the end goal, saying, will this be high impact, low impact, medium impact, right? Then you have all your high impact. So that's your 80-20 right there. So you focus on the high impact items and hopefully you should be able to gain the impact or get to the impact that you're gunning for.
Nice. So this takes me to one of the concepts that we covered. So I conduct these market research courses, right? And in that we do a test called So What test. Exactly what you're saying, right? You have a piece of information and this is your end goal. With that piece of information, you're like, yeah, so what? What am I supposed to do with this piece of data? Just keep asking yourself that question and you figure out if it's an important variable or not, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right, we have just one or two more questions to go, so I think we'll do one more quick round of rapid fire. I'm going to keep breaking
for it.
Okay, so I started with Lakshmi last time. I'll start with Tanya now. Your go-to mantra for an engaging and entertaining training session.
For an engaging and entertaining, I crack a lot of bad jokes. So people who know me, they know that. And I always start with myself. I'll crack a joke on myself. So I think one of my go-to jokes is my name. How trigonometry ruined my life, because my name is Tanya. So sine ya by cos ya is equal to Tanya.
Oh my God.
So like something on those lines, and just it's not a joke, but it just lightens up the situation a little bit, and people start adding to those jokes, and that's when I know, okay, I got everyone. I'm good.
Nice. Okay, settle down, class. Now it's time to hit the court. All right, Lakshmi, for you, coming up next. No, it's boring.
I'm more nervous about you asking me rapid fire questions than training questions.
Why do you think I have these? Okay, so one thing that people don't know about you.
Oh boy. I feel like the kind of questions that I'm getting are very particular category. Demystify Lakshmi. One thing people don't know about me. Not sure. The fact that I've been told that I'm very confident in general and I have this happy-go-lucky image, but I think in reality it's the opposite. I tend to overthink stuff a lot, psychobabble to myself quite a lot. So I don't think people know about it.
But that's interesting. I think given that I have been part of your training sessions, I would agree with the response that you've given, because I'm pretty sure everybody thinks, "Hey, chill, dude."
Yeah. So in terms of training and the confidence, I think I started with having a lot of stage fright, and it's not something that people who have it know. It doesn't go away. You get better at dealing with it, but it never really goes away. So
Goes away.
uh,
You
yeah,
know
it's
how
something you wouldn't expect.
5 minutes before we jumped into this session, I'm like, "Do we karna chahiye kya aise ya waise? Should we tweak it this way or that way?"
Yeah.
Yes, interesting. All right. So moving to the last question that we have for now is the challenges that organizations face in implementing, the implementation of measuring ROI. So, from a few data or statistics that I read, there's just about 22% that are trying. They've not been successful. That are trying to implement measuring value of training programs. And of that, I think of all organizations that are learning centric, just about 8% have been able to do it, maybe, right? And I'm sure we've witnessed it, or the fraternity that we speak with, this is a continuous discussion about, hey, how are we supposed to do this, right? Why is it so challenging? Like, we do understand end goal kya hai. There are other functions that have implemented ROI. Why do we continue to struggle today, or continue to be in this phase? Lakshmi, I'll start with you over here.
All right. So for the longest time, ROI denoted money, right? And as Tanya mentioned some time back, learning and development deals with people. It's in the business of people. It's in the business of behavior. So for us, it was very difficult to sort of show money outcome out of changing behaviors or changing people or transforming people. Over the last decade, what I've noticed is we've gotten smarter in terms of how or what we define as investment. It's no longer just money, but it could be the time reduction. It could be a change in behavior that also is known as your return on investment, right? So traditionally, ROI is calculated with the profit that you make by the investment that you have made. Now the profit, the definition of profit is changing. So, and especially we spoke about data a whole lot, we spoke about analytics a whole lot, right? In the last 10 years, the focus on or the importance of analytics within learning and development or talent development gamut itself has increased a whole lot, right? So now we have the insights that we know are actionable that we can take away to implement the impact that we need. So earlier we sort of only knew about, hey, this many people attended the session, these many people are at the green level in terms of score. This is the red, green, amber analysis that we have. Don't really know what it is for. Don't know how that's going to affect the end goal, right? With learning insights, all of that is changing. And by flipping the definition of what investment means for the company or the party that is investing, it becomes a whole lot easier to measure the impact or the investment return on investment per se.
Tanya, your take on this. I have a few questions and I'll follow up with that.
See, my opinion on this is that for the longest time, training has been looked at as a cost center, right? And most organizations, what they try to do is they want to convert training into a profit center. But to be able to do that, they need to be able to show ROI in some way or form or the other. They need to be able to show some form of revenue coming into that particular department. The first step for anyone to actually go back to Kirkpatrick and really, if we don't get the first four steps right, till we don't reach result, it'll be very difficult to calculate ROI. Right? So reaction and assessments, like Lakshmi was talking about, that is something that every report has. We did these many training hours, and this was the feedback score, and this is the assessment score. So how's that changing anything? we don't know, which is why, the third level, what she was saying is that the behavior change is also kind of translate into ROI, but knowing how to measure it and accepting the fact that I need to measure this now to show the effectiveness of my training sessions, that is important. Measuring result is important. Once you've been able to actually do those things, that is when you will be able to just bring in the element saying, this is how much I spent in these training sessions. This is the result that I got from it. If I were to convert it to any monetary language, and now this is the profit that I will be able to show you. So for anyone to be even to be able to move into the whole ROI state, first 4 level have to be like a checkbox. Unless we get to the behavior and result, it will be very difficult to start there. And organizations have been able to get there. Measuring ROI is not difficult. You only need to know what your inputs are and then know how to convert even behavior for that matter. Like what she was talking about. It can be converted into numbers, because if I'm able to change behaviors, I am able to improve engagement. If I'm able to improve engagement, I am able to reduce attrition, which reduces my hiring cost.
Okay, I am curious to know how, if we were to cite an example, how can we measure behavior in numbers? How do we do that conversion? Because it's usually an intangible outcome, right? So this was supposed to be my follow up this thing, but it's an intangible outcome. How do you measure it? Because okay, I will let you share your insights on this.
I think you can go with like the work from home example that you were talking about, right? So with the work from home example, the outcome that probably the company or the business wants is, let's say, more productivity.
Okay.
Right? Productivity is tangible. You can very well go ahead and measure it, saying what was the earlier productivity versus what's the productivity when people are working remotely. However, what you have to measure at a behavior stage is what sort of behavior changes is leading to that productivity to be successful, right? So the training is geared towards changing behaviors, but the evaluation or the impact, the return of investment is geared towards measuring productivity.
True.
So that's how you link an untangible thing to a tangible, measurable.
So measuring productivity will still be the next stage, right? Before
Measuring productivity is your goal. That is your goal, because that's what the business wants, right? When you do the needs analysis, you figure out the reason why productivity is low is because now with the switch in workplace, certain behaviors that were not there earlier needs to be inculcated now. So your entire training program is to facilitate those behaviors in people, that behavioral change. So for the first level, second level, third level of your impact analysis, you will measure behavior. For the fourth level, when she was talking about results, you will now have to connect how this change in behaviors is affecting productivity.
True. Okay. But if you come back to how do you measure behavior? Okay. In a customer service space, it's actually they have mastered this. So measuring behavior has actually been mastered in the customer service space because of the quality measures that they have. So every person every week has a quality evaluation. It could be either a remote evaluation or a live evaluation, right? So my quality form has these check boxes. So did this person acknowledge? Was this person polite? Was this person able to position negative information positively? What was the choice of words that this person? These are behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if I have a quality evaluation for myself every single week by a person for let's say 2 months or 3 months, you already have qualitative data right there. So out of 12 instances, how many times was I able to actually do those things? Was I able to acknowledge? Was I was polite? I was able to give the information in a positive manner, etc. It is difficult to do in other places. It's not important. But the key is in evaluating consistently with proper measures and proper defined measures.
Yeah, I think it's as important like in leadership development, or when you're developing leaders within your organization, a lot of these programs focus on what is the content, how you're delivering the content versus how the engagement levels are. Whereas the business wants completely different outcomes out of your leadership development, right? So it could be a lower churn rate or lower attrition rate. It could be a higher growth rate within the company that they want to see. They want to see internal movement happening through the leaders, right? Is your leadership development program able to evaluate that? Is it accounting for behaviors that will enable that? And behavior analysis, as Tanya just mentioned, you can do it with periodic surveys, you can do it in your performance reviews. Most of the companies have like a quarterly performance reviews, or they have half-yearly performance reviews. That might be too far spaced, but if every interaction or fewer interactions with your managers can be tracked down in a survey manner, just like a customer survey form, you can capture behavioral changes. You can put a number to how many times it's happening versus how many times it should happen.
True.
Okay, so my question over here is about co-ownership of training projects, right? We're talking about behavioral changes and training or L&D arm looking at a different outcome versus a business arm looking at a different outcome sometimes, right? How can co-ownership kind of help, or the concept of co-ownership of a particular training project? Tanya has a very big smile on her face.
Yeah, because these are training problems, and training related problems are very exciting. So see, there are some trainings that we do, okay, and people come at those trainings and they're like, haha, yes, sure. They go back into their actual spaces and the supervisor is like, that was training now. You do what I'm telling you. Okay. So now, if I happen to have a coffee or a chai with this person and, they're like, I really want to implement what I have learned, but, I'm being told not to. That's my anecdote right there. I will have to convert that into data. So now the co-ownership will go as such that while I'm expecting, the teams to do their own quality measures and surveys and do their audits, etc., training will have to do a parallel. That's the follow-up she was talking about. Training will have to do a parallel one. And that is where you will be able to, just put up our data, put up their data and saying, hey, so why is there a mismatch here? What's the...
And it really ever works if, the people on the floor, they have their priority list set, right? They'll have to listen to what their supervisor is saying, and the supervisor will have to listen to what his supervisor or her supervisor, and so on and so forth. So there is definitely a chain of command that happens. Yeah. If training is functioning like an independent silo, right? It's just sort of putting it out in the world saying training is important, learning is important, learning is important, but they don't report to us. What we say is not important unless it's made important. So there needs to be a mindset shift that needs to happen, right? Nowadays, I think the fad term for it is learning culture, right? That's what they're talking about when they're talking about building a culture of learning. There is not a single person who's working who doesn't know the importance of learning. However, if I take that data to how many people are actually spending time learning, upskilling, reskilling themselves, drastically falls down. So why is it that people know why it's important, but they don't put in the time to do it? That's because the actual immediate impact of it is not sure. So what are people interested in doing? They're interested in their own growth. They're interested in earning more money. They're interested in earning credibility or establishing themselves as somebody who's, an expert in their field. If you can align learning to that, and I'm not saying that needs to be just L&D talking about it, their immediate bosses, like it needs to be top down, right? So if my boss is not talking about how learning is important for my growth, I'm not hearing it from the right sources. So learning in a collaborative co-effort is it's undeniable. Like it's important. If you're not doing it, then the whole effort goes to complete zero.
True. Tanya, you were adding
No,
something
so I was just adding to what she's saying is how, there is now it's important, like every project usually in whichever space it has a sponsor. Similarly, learning initiatives also require a sponsor. So someone in the leadership or in a mid leadership level who sponsors that training initiative and says that yes, I will be a part owner to make sure that one, implementation happen, one, the training happens, and second, that the implementations happen, and I will be looking at results as well. Right? So that sponsorship piece also comes into picture whenever we are talking about co-owning any result. Generally, they will never, accept that just training has been able to bring about change. It's very difficult to pinpoint that this has happened just because of training. There will be so many different elements because of which change has happened or not happened, right? So having that sponsor really helps.
Yeah, and I think the most successful learning interventions have had a higher level of engagement from the leaders itself, right? So if you're looking at Apple University or Google Learning Center, you would see that the leaders are very, very invested, and not just from a investment point of view, saying, "Hey, I'm giving you this much annual revenue to make this happen." They're actually in it. They dedicate time and effort. They probably are also part of the content team, right? They help in brainstorming as to how the program can be dispersed to everybody on the floor. So the most successful interventions have a greater amount of investment from the leaders of that company itself.
I think the last 1 or 2 minutes that we've dedicated to more of the term that Lakshmi used,
Sorry?
learn culture.
Gotcha.
Right? So, and it's absolutely right. It's a trickle down effect. If it does not happen from the top, if there is no importance seen at the top, and it's just because, hey, एक L&D arm होना चाहिए, इसलिए एक learning arm है, but there is no drive, there is no push to encourage learning projects and also make sure that it's kind of being implemented. There is a buy-in from different stakeholders and it's being rolled out effectively. Okay, so I'm going to take a step back and go back to the connect between behavior and business outcome. Right? So there is a lot of discussion about rapid implementation of training programs. Right? How fast can you deliver it, and how fast can somebody see the outcomes? So you might see a change or a shift in behavior in a certain amount of time, but from when we conduct a training session in whichever method, whether it's an in-class instructor-led method or it's delivering it via videos or other different resources, once a training program is delivered, from then to when you can actually see change, if it is driven by behavior, it can be a longer time, right? How can we as a team or an L&D arm kind of persuade or push or convince that this is how it kind of works? How can it be incorporated in your training design, program design, or when it comes to stakeholder management, talking about, hey, today this is the impact that you're going to see, and this is the outcome that will come after X number of days, weeks, months, whatever it works out like. So a little bit on that.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So in terms of agile learning, I think the entire world is changing in terms of how they learn. Micro learning is something that's picking up a lot of speed. That's because the preferences of learners have changed over a period of time. Nobody has the time or the patience to sit through an entire day's workshop, right? Back then, I think about 5 or 6 years back, leadership out summits used to be a thing, right? People would love to take 2 days off, go to a different place, and dedicate those 2 days for learning. If I were to do that now, the idea would be met with like some amount of skepticism. Yep. That's because people are more adapted to learning by themselves at a pace that they can control at the time that they want to or they're ready to learn. You can't just schedule them to sit in the class and say, okay, learn now, right? With that, I think being agile is very, very important. So one good thing is we don't have to create anything from scratch. None of the content that you're going to tell them is going to be new. None of the methods you're going to use to deliver that training is going to be new, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel in that terms. It's faster than it was before, or it should be at least if it's not already, right? Focusing from content driven to experiential learning helps quite a lot. If you know exactly where you want them to or what you want them to do, going back to the behaviors again, right? You know which behaviors you want them to display, let's say the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, gear the entire thing towards that, right? Have a tiered learning approach. So I was reading, I think a few months ago, about how this company changed their whole onboarding approach. So what they realized is they were doing a whole day. The first day one, the onboarding experience was mostly geared towards, talking about the history of the company, what they can expect, where the pantry is, who their managers are, who their team members are, which is all good, which is all necessary information. However, when they did the survey on the floor and they asked all the peer level saying, what would you wish new joiners knew before they moved into the team? The answers were very different. If they asked managers saying, hey, what would you wish new joiners knew before they got into the team, right? Or right off the bat, what information do you think they should know? What they wanted, the colleagues and the managers wanted, versus what the onboarding program is providing, completely different, right? So post that survey, what they did was they did an agile approach. They said, okay, forget it, because whatever we are solving for is not the need. They figured out the need and they changed their entire onboarding program to address these needs. So now post the new onboarding program, new hires will be able to do at least 80% of what the manager expects, or 80% of what the colleague expects, right? So you have the higher impact, you have the lesser time to do it, and obviously your onboarding program doesn't fit the mold of the generic onboarding program, but your stakeholders are happy, your company is happy, your new joiners, more importantly, are happy, right? Yeah.
Very interesting. Tanya, your take over here before we move to.
Initially, I'm sure, like when Lakshmi and I would have started our training journey, our our trainings used to include typing tutor, where people would practice
That
typing.
used to be part of the hiring test. Yeah.
It is part of hiring. Yeah, absolutely. We used to test people on how fast they can type, and only then they could be hired. And then yet there would be certain classes on, practicing typing. We had this whole app and everything, and people would practice typing. Now, at that time, early life was considered to be 90 days, right? Today, early life is not 90 days. Today, early life is basically the learning curve for a new journey to be at a certain level where they can actually be measured against their peers. So early life is not 90 days anymore. In a lot of different organizations, it's actually 30 days. Some places it's just 45 days. And that is the kind of change, that agile learning, what you was talking about, has been able to bring about. Like, okay, how do we make, a learning faster? Should we, what do the learners want? Is this working? That is not working. Okay, that is not working. Let's chuck it. Let's change it. Let's add something new. So at any given time, if the training wing is not working, changing, moving, we really won't be able to bring about the impact or the objectives of the business, because business goals are moving and changing every day. So there has to be a working backwards kind of a situation, that okay, so yesterday I was chasing, let's say as an example, 80% CSAT and I was happy with it, but now I've changed my entire approach and I'm not even chasing CSAT anymore. I'm chasing NPS, different ball game already. It's a game changer. Like if you go from CSAT to NPS, you're now driving advocacy.
Right.
So what your people need to learn is absolutely different. So are we able to be so agile that we can change and adapt as per our business goals and make these changes to make sure that the people know what they require, and only then they are being able to really learn and get there and do whatever they are expected to do in their roles.
Very interesting. So, based on a requirement, based on a need, I think L&D is able to pull up their stocks and deliver, as per a business requirement. Okay, so I'm going to close our questions over here. While there are a lot of them popping up, but we're kind of running out of time, and we have one or two questions from the audience as well.
Okay.
Before we hit audience questions, the final round of Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
I'm not going to let you go that easy. All right, Lakshmi, because you're so excited about rapid fire. A bizarre experience you've had while in an in-class session.
While in a class, I don't like it.
A funny one, a bizarre one. Yeah, somebody said something weird.
So it did happen like a lot of times. I think depending on how the infrastructure is placed, sometimes there is one classroom after the other classroom placed, right? So sometimes folks sort of enter who are not supposed to be part of your training, but like you don't know they're not part of your training. You don't know they're not part of your training. So half the training goes, and suddenly somebody's like, "Am I in the right class?" So it so happened once that I had about 10 people who had like joined the training and they were not part of my training, and like we were almost done with half a day and they were all like, are we like, they didn't ask until like the second break to check whether they're in the right class or not, so that was quite bizarre.
Tanya, share one such experience of yours too.
Bizarre. I've had a lot of bizarre situations in classrooms. It was, and this is very like imprinted in my head because this was my first ever training batch. I was not even promoted as a trainer. I was a you call them loan trainers or auxiliary trainers. I was going through my IJP process at the time, and there was this person in my class who I asked him a question, and he had a nervous breakdown because I had asked him that question out. So, like, started crying and started breathing heavily and throwing his hands in the air and everything. Oh my god! No. I just asked you if you learned. I didn't mean to. So that was very bizarre. So from then on, I'll always ask. I'll ask you a question. Like that acceptance, and then I'll ask a question.
One such event and behavioral change shift.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay, one last question for both of you. A skill you have learned during the lockdown.
Who, me? A skill.
Trainers much.
We should have the answer right off the bat, shouldn't we? Given that we are both advocating learning.
Really good webinar engagement.
Oh, that's interesting. Very, very relevant given that we've moved 100% on that.
Yeah, we had to, like agility, what we were talking about, being agile.
Yeah.
Literally. So, yeah, webinar engagement completely.
I think it would be going back to books. Going back to books, like physical books. It's like you generally don't have the time to come back from work and then pick up a book. I know people make conscious effort to do it, but for the last few years, I've lost that touch. I used to be able to complete a book in a few days, but that's not my speed anymore. And I forgot sort of how much I enjoyed it. With the lockdown, I save time on like getting ready, going to work, coming back from work. So there's a lot of time that I save in a day, and I'm dedicating that towards the books.
Which is the last book that you read? Sorry, I had to ask.
I'm still reading it. I think this is my like third time going through the book. It's called *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harris. Yeah, quite an interesting take on humanity.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a few questions from the audience now. I'm going to start picking up one at a time.
Okay.
There is one from Mr. Murli Sondar, which says, "Is Kirkpatrick's model relevant even now, after all these years?"
Very, very, very relevant. Unless, like I said before, unless those tick boxes have been checked, reaching ROI, not impossible, is difficult. But it's much easier if you go through. I don't know how we came up with it, but it's relevant.
Still
It's
relevant.
absolutely relevant. I think more relevant now than ever, right? Because the focus towards learning is higher now. Everybody is trying to reskill at this time. So unless you know There are other methodologies out there, right? But Kirkpatrick is so simple for any level to like accommodate that in their program design. If there are bits and pieces that don't align with your end goal, you can remove them. So, for example, let's say reaction or learning is not something that is important to you because it doesn't affect the end goal. You can focus on the layer that does. So, if behavior is more important, measure that. If ROI is more, results is more important, measure that. It's very adaptable, the model.
True. That's very interesting. It can be a guideline, right? It's the Bible that you keep going back to and say, hey, what is it that I can use out of the entire model? Nice.
Right.
All right. Another question that we have, while it's a little more ops related, I'll still throw it and ask. In case of customer service, how do you measure customer satisfaction through online survey?
You want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So customer satisfaction through online survey is a very old concept. It's not just learning and development. It's primarily used in marketing. You walk into a store to buy a pair of gloves, they will ask you a survey, right? You go to a restaurant to have a plate of idli, you will still have a survey at you, right? So in terms of knowing what, like, every survey at the end of the day again goes back to what your end goal is. So if you can design your survey based on what you want to measure and evaluate, the chances of success are higher instead of randomly asking questions by mixing and matching all the surveys that you've ever seen. So it's important, and I would definitely recommend that each of your training programs have a completely different survey altogether, because the objective of each program is different. So you can't have a one survey fits all model going on, then you're not necessarily getting any insight. So even if you have a data scientist working for you, it will be very difficult for them to find the right insights for you. So align your survey based on what your outcomes for that program is, and you should be on the right track.
Interesting. So this is definitely something. Survey design is something that we usually cover, because when you're doing market research, right, it also, whether you're doing market research, you're conducting survey as feedback from your customers or your participants, irrespective, there's like you start with the end goal in that case scenario as well, right? You start off with, hey, this is the answer I want, and this is the business decision I will take based on the answer. Now let's see what questions I can ask my customers to get to this information.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. All right. So that brings us to the end of the entire session. That brings us to the end of our questions from the audience. But we've received a lot of feedback, a lot of wonderful comments over here. It seems like people enjoyed the discussion. So big thank you to both of you for joining in today.
My emoji.
I absolutely love the discussion. And thanks a lot to all the viewers for joining in. Well, do sign up. Tune in next week as well. Same time, same channel. Until then, have a happy weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Have a happy weekend.